Hey, you all. I thought what I'd do is I'd run through some of the things that you should be thinking about in the next week or so. I'm going to very quickly run through a couple of things related to your first big assignment. It is a rhetorical analysis assignment. You must have been thinking at some point, okay, why are we reading all this stuff? What is the goal here? And I've hoped that I've made clear that in different kinds of ways, what we want to do is we don't want to memorize all of these tools. We want to start to think of them as ways to do rhetorical analysis, tools that we can pick up and apply to our own sense of how people are arguing about issues related to the environment. So what does that mean? I'm going to share my screen really quickly and go through a couple of things. This is a video to help you understand how to get started on this first paper, the rhetorical analysis essay. So here we are at week 4, and if you've been watching these videos, that's just great. You'll notice that not everything is in for week 5 and week 6, but one of the things that I wanted to point out to you is that the first week of March, I want you to turn in a rhetorical analysis essay in draft form so that we can peer critique it. Now, where would you learn about that essay? Well, you'd go to this assignments page right here. And what I've done very quickly is I've gone to the assignments page so that we can see exactly what's going on. This rhetorical analysis essay is going to be due right before spring break. And what it's going to do is it's going to help us see different kinds of ways in which rhetoric operates in the world. What you're going to do is you're going to select a term that you've become familiar with in the first half of this course. Now, that could be ethos, pathos, logos. It could be audience. It could be context or purpose. It could be semantic categories. It could be typecasting or other kinds of things. We'll talk about that in a second, and apply it to your own environmental argument. Now, where do you find those? I'll talk about that as well. But first things first, let's talk about how we get started with this particular essay. For your essay, like I say right here, select one rhetorical theorist we've studied and choose a main concept, key term, or claim from that text and apply it to a test object of your choice. To get started, review the Ross-Kelly, which we read, the Cloud, or the Schiappa. That should say Scott. I'm going to change it right now to Scott. Or Schiappa, and then choose one of the terms or concepts that they discussed. Okay, so what does that mean in practice? Here we are at Ross-Kelly. If you responded really powerfully to this notion of audience, for example, and Cassidy Murphy and several other people, Travis Bybee and Eric Morgan also were here, then you can write a whole paper analyzing how a particular author tries to reach out to an audience. What are the particular kinds of strategies that that author uses? If you were struck by ethos, for example, maybe because you're familiar with ethos in other contexts, you could write a whole paper on how ethos works in a particular article or video or other kinds of things that you might find. If, for example, you were really interested in context and purpose, or even, let's just say, visual rhetoric, then here, once again, you can focus your entire paper on how the visual rhetoric works in a particular argument. So to get started with this particular part of it, then what you want to do is you want to review what you've done so far in Perusall and the kinds of posts that you've put in Google Currents, and say to yourself, well, what's the term that I feel most comfortable with, most interested in, most engaged by, and choose that one to get started. Now, then what do? You're going to look for ways to see that term in an artifact or a test object of your choosing. So what does this mean? It could be a website. It could be a YouTube video. It could be a speech, an opinion article, or an op-ed, or something else that discusses a significant environmental concern or a topic. I'll leave that up to you. This is another way to get into this assignment, of course, is to go to your areas of expertise, your majors, and think about, well, what are the kinds of environmental issues that people in my major argue about, debate, think through? What are the controversial issues? For example, when I first taught this, when I last taught this class 5 years ago, the sustainable manufacturing majors were all having debates about plastics and recycling. And I made the entire course about plastics and recycling for that very reason. But they were getting it from all sides. Some people saying we shouldn't recycle, some people saying we should, other people saying people don't know about enough about plastics. Other people saying, you know, there's different kinds of plastics in the world. It was fun. That was the stuff. And it came out of their major, right? So be thinking about this. A text from a historical event. It could be a protest that you think was particularly persuasive or not persuasive, and that's interesting. It could be an artifact that is mostly visual, that is agitprop, artwork, graffiti, a movement anthem, a song. It could be embodied like a pageant or a die-in. These are all forms of protesting, of raising awareness of certain kinds of environmental issues. The only thing you may not choose, of course, is a test object that we've already worked with in class. I'd really like to see not only that you're applying certain kinds of tools from rhetorical analysis, but that you select your own thing based on the kinds of things that you read on a daily basis, or the kinds of issues that are interesting to you. So I want to learn from you. I want to learn how you read, and I also want to learn the kinds of issues that you care about. So what are you doing with that then? You are applying the tools of rhetorical analysis to that particular piece. If, for example, you're very interested in Biljana Scott's notion of preemptive arguments, you'd want to review what she says about preemptive arguments, and not only that, what she says they do. Now, this is important, okay? So I want to talk about this. This is the Brady Bunch house, by the way. Here I am in my basement, and here's the Brady Bunch house. You're not going to just sort of say in your paper, okay, so I'm interested in preemptive arguments, and here Biljana Scott's definition of preemptive arguments. You're going to take one step further. That's your first step, where you find all of the preemptive arguments in a particular artifact, and you share them with us by quoting from that author. But then you go one step further and you say, so what? Okay, so why are preemptive arguments used here, and to what effect? That is, particularly for preemptive arguments now, how do the preemptive arguments help this author frame this environmental issue in this particular kind of way? And what can we learn from that? That's going to be one of the things that's going to be really important in this essay, is to go beyond just sort of saying, well, I saw a preemptive argument here and here and here. You want to go one step further and say, and here's what I think they mean. Here's how they affect the discourse. Here is what they accomplish rhetorically. I'm going to get back into share screen just for a second here to point out one other thing. Then what that means in terms of your assignment is this. You're helping us see this text in a new way and understand better how it works to persuade readers. Support your analysis, of course, by lots of quotes. That's what we in the humanities call concrete evidence, in the form of brief and carefully selected quotes, paraphrases from your test object and from that source you're using. Biljana Scott, Ross Kelly, Schiappa, and so on. What I'd like you to do to conclude your paper is this very thing right here. Speculate about the implications of your findings for environmental communication. Okay, so if everybody used preemptive arguments in these ways, would things get better or worse? Would things be clearer or more opaque? Would we be better off as a society or worse? What insights does the use of this technique give you into environmental rhetoric? Okay, here's another way to think about it. Do people use preemptive arguments in this way all the time for this particular issue? What would that mean? Are we going to be able to actually take action based on the use of preemptive arguments? A lot of different kinds of ways that you could approach this particular question, but that's what one would do at the end. Beyond the kind of the so what question is, okay, so where does this leave us as rhetorical theorists? What insights, like I say here, does the use of this technique give you into environmental rhetoric or social action on this environmental issue, the work of persuading ambivalent or hostile audiences, or something else that I haven't quite written yet? So you're going to be doing these things, and I'm going to be looking at it in this way. And the final thing that I wanted to say is, if you're having trouble finding a particular artifact, you might start with these. I used all of these in a previous version of the course about 5 years ago. A lot of really interesting ones. This explains why natural is BS. How automakers invented jaywalking is one of my favorite ones. Jaywalking was not a crime until cars were invented and we changed the use of streets. Things that have done the most good for climate change: save the honeybee, sterilize the earth. Another classic, right? So in these kinds of ways, what I'm hoping that you'll do is you will take what you have done with these Google Currents posts, where you're examining the use of particular kinds of tools given artifacts that I have given you, and you're going to pick up on one of these for your own. That is, you're going to go out into the universe and look for a test object, what we often call an artifact, to explore the use of that rhetorical term in. You're going to look for definitions in a piece in Time magazine. You're going to look for semantic categories in a YouTube video that you watched. You're going to look for ethos in a die-in up in Portland 3 weeks ago. You're going to do that work, and you're going to share with me what you found. Okay, so we'll be talking about this more. This is a very long video, but I'm hoping that it has given you a sense of where we go. One final thing I'm just going to share very quickly, just to end this video, is to remember the tentative schedule works like this. Week 5, you'll be brainstorming, I hope. Week 6, you'll bring in this rhetorical analysis essay in draft form, turn it in on Google Currents, and then each of you will read and respond to 2 other papers in the class. Then finally, you'll turn in your peer reviews and you'll turn in your rhetorical analysis essay before we leave for spring break. Okay, so that's it. My dogs are barking.